Um, Hi, I'm Jay Northland. We are with Amphitheater High School, and we first want to say thank you to Carl Murdoch and to Victoria Aveyard for having us here today and having the opportunity to ask Victoria Aveyard questions about her writing. We were lucky enough to be able to read through the book Groundbreaker, the series for which I'm currently reading the second book. To start us off, what was your favorite part about writing for the Groundbreaker series?
Ooh, well, first of all, you have a really good podcast voice.
Thank you.
So this is great. For me, when I was first thinking about writing what was going to be my next book after my first series, Red Queen, and that book had found so many readers, and I felt so lucky to have that experience. That book was just bigger than I ever believed it could be, but it then allowed me to be in a very privileged position afterwards where my publisher said, what do you want to write next? And a lot of authors don't get asked that question. And so I asked myself, what do I want to write next? And I was thinking about, well, what was I looking to read when I was a teenager? What were the books I was looking for and not finding? What was I reading at that time and wishing I had more of? And I remember in high school and then in college, I was writing a lot of fan fiction and reading a lot of fan fiction. And most of my fan fiction that I both wrote and read was about bringing more female characters into the stories that I love that either had like the one token girl or nobody at all. And the ones I really gravitated towards was Lord of the Rings. That was my favorite book, my favorite set of movies. I love that stuff so much. I loved that world and that story, but it also didn't feel like it loved me back, There's no room for you in the Fellowship of the Ring unless you're a very specific straight white man. Then if you're not that, you're not in the group. And I always was looking for stories that included more women and more different faces in that sort of story. So then I was thinking, okay, I want my next book to be something that kind of engages with that and has a conversation with that, with this thing that I love so much, but I also feel like I want a little bit more from. So going into the Groundbreaker series, I was thinking about how do I bring women into a story like Lord of the Rings? And then the question I asked myself, well, what happens when the heroes fail? And it was the Fellowship of the Ring goes out into the world to save the world, and then they all die, but the world still needs saving. So who's the JV team of saving the world? And that's what Groundbreaker became, was this sort of Lord of the Rings meets Guardians of the Galaxy. It's not the heroes, it's the criminals and the misfits and the not-so-chosen ones who have to put aside their differences and work together, even though they kind of hate each other, and even though they're kind of like, I don't really like the world too much, but I was very inspired by that moment in Guardians of the Galaxy where they're like, why do you want to save the galaxy? And he says, because I'm one of the idiots who lives in it. And I love that approach, especially to high fantasy, which is by definition extraordinary and unbelievable. And the way you make readers like you believe it and feel attached to it is by grounding it in believable real characters. So getting to go into a Lord of the Rings-like story with characters who are suddenly going to be like, that's stupid, we shouldn't do that thing, or this is idiotic, who can kind of poke fun at the tropes that have always been very, very serious. I loved it. So getting to get all of that out on the page, if you guys have read it. So you're thinking of that prologue again now, like, oh right, she did send the Fellowship of the Ring out to save the world, and they did all die immediately. And I'm mad I had to memorize those names, because as the chapter was going on and they all started dying, I thought, wait a second. So that's where Groundbreaker came from.
Being entirely honest, I did not take the time to memorize the names.
Good. You know what? Good.
I want to ask my name is Fariba Fayazi, and I wanted to ask, how did you keep track of all characters and ensure they don't blend in together?
Yes, so because Groundbreaker is an ensemble story told in third person with different perspectives, like every chapter is another character's limited perspective. That was the great challenge, is you always want to make sure your readers can be able to identify just from reading a paragraph, not from seeing, the beginning of the chapter saying it's this character. You want them to be able to read it and hear that character's voice and know it's that character without even being told it's that character. And luckily, in Red Queen, I had some struggle because the characters were all of the same age, similar backgrounds, or like struggling through the exact same things. So that does make their voices really hard to make disparate. When it came to Groundbreaker, the characters were so different already you know, the 17-year-old girl going out into the world for the first time is not going to sound the same as the 500-year immortal warrior who doesn't know how to metabolize his feelings, or the very cold-hearted, very pragmatic assassin who is just like, I got to save the world and keep all of you alive at the same time. Kill me. And then, so it wasn't as hard to not make them blend together because they were already, by definition, who they were, so very different. And I do feel like I knew them very well, very quickly. An exercise I did do for myself before I was really into the story was I wrote a line of each of the characters and what they would be doing in a bar fight. And that really helped me identify the core of each of those people, where it's like, this character would have started it. This character would be upstairs sleeping. This character would be stealing drinks off of people's tables. This character would be in the corner like eating popcorn and watching it unfold, kind of thing. And that really helped me kind of define them very, very quickly. And then I did get to write a bar fight later in the chapter where we do get to do a lot of those things.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Remy Anderson. I was wondering, how much do you spend into creating twists in your stories? Like, say, for instance, Queen Erida and Turriston. How long did you come up to come up?
So when I first was sort of outlining the story, I knew where she was going in her storyline in terms of her relation to the other characters and the choices she was making. But I had already started writing, I think I was maybe 7-ish chapters into the book when I realized, wait, I'm also going to have her perspective in this too. And I wanted to mislead the audience, not just through what the other characters are thinking of, like, we have to get to this queen because she's going to help us. And the audience is like, okay, she's going to be the one who helps them. But I also wanted to mislead the audience as they were reading her, because I wanted her to be a relatable, understandable antagonist. Because I think those are the most enjoyable villains, are the ones who you're like, I sort of see your point. I don't agree with what you're doing, but I understand how you got here. I love writing those kind of villains. I loved, by the time a lot of readers got to the third book, they were saying, I don't know who I'm rooting for. And that's sort of what I'm thinking about when I'm writing my twists, is I want you to be on your toes constantly. Not in like a desensitized, oh, I'm not going to get attached to anybody because they might die sort of way, but more in a, you're holding your breath when you turn the page. And my twists, at least the big ones, I know they're coming. I always know they're coming. I write the book with the intention to get you to the twist and get you in a place where you're looking here and suddenly something happens here. I will say the best twists in books are the ones that take you by surprise, but as soon as it happens, you think, how did I not see that coming?
Yeah.
Those are the best twists, in my opinion. The ones that come completely out of left field, that weren't planted at all, that the seeds were not left there, and you did not see the crumbs, I don't think they're as fun as the ones where you're like, you put the wool over my eyes. I believed you. I trusted you. I love playing with your trust as a reader. I loved it.
My name is Phoebe. I saw in one of your other interviews that you had to stop your Red Queen adaptation because of the writer's strike, because of AI taking over. How are you dealing with that as a screenwriter?
So the strike is over, and that was like everybody on the union sides, everybody shut down, all production shut down, and that did slow down and kill a lot of projects. I am a union member of the WGA, so I'm very happy that we got the deal that we did. AI, especially generative AI, is going to consistently be an issue in creative fields. And so that is something that I am very aware of as a screenwriter and as an author. I'm seeing it a lot more on the publishing side too, and there's a lot of conversations being had in our contracts, in our legal representation, in how we protect ourselves and protect our work. It is very weird. Also, there's a new part of Microsoft Word that is now AI, and you can ask it to write in the style of Victoria Aveyard, and it will write you a paragraph like me. And I think, how did you learn that? What did you take it from? It's my property. You do not own this, but it's been scraped anyways because our work is on the internet in PDF form because it's been pirated or whatever. So that's really discouraging, and to have to be able to say, like, to my publishing team, hey, anybody who touches my manuscript, they cannot open it in a Microsoft Word that has this app enabled because I don't want it scraping from my new books. And so it's very strange to suddenly have to be like tech aware as a writer. It just seems like there's so many more things every single day that we just want to write the books. But we got to think about all XYZ. It's just changing so fast.
Hi, I'm Jasmine Lopez Vergara. So on the back of the book, as all of us can see, you give us a rundown of the characters and who we're about to experience in the book. It goes a squire, an assassin, an immortal, and a pirate daughter. What was the driving factor when creating these unique personalities, and how did you avoid stereotyping?
Well, I wanted to start from sort of the archetypes, the immortal, the assassin, the squire. It almost feels like D&D or like a video game, like you're choosing your character and you're choosing like your class of person and where they're coming from and what their background's going to be and what their sort of like skill set is. And then whenever I create characters, I love to start from that sort of familiar root, those archetypes that we all know and love, and then you start chipping away at them and sort of sharpen the details and try and make them be their own person within this sort of character field. So Sarasa, the assassin, is very much, you know, she's up there with a lot of the other assassins that you can think of, but at the same time I wanted to give her her own little, you know, stamp, her fingerprints. I want them to be different. And the way you do that is by getting into like the core of who they are as a person and treating them like people, and having someone like her who is very pragmatic to like a fault in a story that is about like battling good and evil. I love having that Greek chorus character who can kind of call out things as they are and be like, no, we can't leave that person alive. They saw our faces and we're on the run. And I don't care that you're the noble hero. We have to kill them.
Yeah.
And you're just like, yes, I wanted someone to say that in Game of Thrones. It's sort of like that, you know, Ned Stark was a hero and Ned Stark died. And then with Coraine, who is sort of my not so chosen one, I really jumped off from the point of like, we have all those stories about the magical children who don't know their fathers and are heirs to this great legacy. And you see her being told like, your father was this prince, and she's like, I know, he was a deadbeat and he never wanted anything to do with me. I don't want anything to do with him. Oh, he's dead? I don't care. But then also still kind of being like, do I care? Am I mad? I'll never have that part of myself again. And then at the same time, she's like, well, my mom won't let me leave my small town, but this is a way to do it. And I really related to that as a kid who left her small town. So I guess you start from the big, you start from the macro, and you chip down to what makes them different, what their details are, what their background is, and just kind of play them out. I like to think of my characters as rats that I have created. And the story is the maze. And they all run the maze a little bit different, and I just watch.
Hi, my name is Patience Wilson. When creating your story and putting the Ashley standards inside of it, what inspired them? Was it a folklore or tale you heard as a child?
Definitely Lord of the Rings. Absolutely Lord of the Rings. I came into this book like, how do I dialogue with this thing that I love, but also in this story, one of the things I've always thought about with like the immortals, the elves, or like the fairies or whatever, and they're so like distant from society, and they're always seen as these sort of like noble and tragic things. I wanted to also see like, well, what's the twist of that? What's the humanity edge of that? What is people who don't know what death is, what do they do when death happens? And so you have the immortal character Dom, who is very much not in touch with his emotions, the guy who can run through a wall but is absolutely not going to be like, I'm sad my best friend died. And you literally have a teenage boy telling him like, it's okay to be sad, we'll get through it, it's going to eat you up no matter what. Even if you don't say you're sad, it's still eating at you. We have to talk through our feelings. And I really loved writing a scene where a teenage boy and a very grown man have to be like, we need to deal with our emotions. But yeah, so I wanted those little pieces of like, what's the realistic side of the fantasy, you know?
Yeah.
So having that immortal character, I really got to poke fun at it. Like he gets stabbed and he's like, I'm fine, I'm immortal, and he takes the knife out, and the assassin's like, you're now gonna bleed to death. that can still happen to you. And he's like, oh, you're right. What do I do? It's almost like a little bit of an alien.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Clinton. When deciding Craig's backstory, what was your purpose for having Cortale cheat on his wife?
Well, they were never married.
Oh, okay. Or well, then
The
sleep with someone else.
So he slept with a lot of people. So that's what I wanted that realistic version of the noble prince who's been told his whole life, like, you are meant to be the king of this ancient kingdom and it's going to come back and save us all. I almost looked at Cortale and Terriston. I sort of thought of them as like an Aragorn character. So if you've seen Lord of the Rings, Aragorn is always like, you are the end of the line and you are meant to be the returned king of Gondor. And I thought, that would really mess you up as a child to be told that your whole life. And then I thought, well, what if there was a second one? Because like the older brother is the one meant to be the king returned. Well, what am I? Why don't I get to be that thing? And so it kind of was that corrupted version of that noble prince archetype. And then having Cortale be like, yeah, trying to do everything he can to be that, to live up to that. But at the same time, he's a human, he's a man. So of course, he's a dude. He screwed around and then knocks up a woman and she's like, bye, I'm gonna go have your kid. And he's like, well, noble princes don't have kids out of wedlock with pirate women. See ya. And then of course there's Terriston, the twin, who they couldn't sort of accept into this environment, and he grows up alone and he grows up on the streets, but he still knows, like, I'm meant for more and I'm gonna take it because no one's giving it to me. And so you, again, with that character, and that as the series unfolds and we learn more about him, it's sort of like, I don't agree with your tactics to take over the world, but I get why you're trying to do it. And that's what I'm always shooting for with my villains. So I always want to show that, like, realistic side of the hero.
Hi, my name is Linda.
Hi.
Dom has a lot of superhuman abilities. Why give immortals all these extra types of abilities instead of choosing to keep them entirely human with the additional person?
Yeah, so I loved having the one, just from a technical standpoint, having that one character who's like, I can punch through the store if we need to, is very, very helpful. But also I think juxtaposing how strong or fast, or like he has really great hearing, having all of those things that elevate him physically and make him more dangerous, while also having him be so emotionally stunted at the same time. Like, I love that dichotomy, and that was really fun to play with. And I did really like, as the series unfolds, him being able to hear other people's heartbeats, so he can tell when someone's nervous, and that was really fun for romantic reasons.
My name is Emma Saber. I have been writing my whole life, but when I'm asked about what I write, I often think about my latest works and not my first pieces. Is there a work that may or may not be hidden in a drawer somewhere that you would consider one of your first?
So my first book I ever finished was Red Queens. I'm very, very lucky in that the first book I ever wrote was my first book published. I did go to college to study screenwriting. I went to film school, and so I wrote features and TV specs, so pilots of television shows, and that's how I learned how to tell a story, from the film and television side. So my storytelling, the structure of my work is very, very aligned with film structure, so like 3-acting sequence. So anything that I haven't, like, that I finished and haven't put out in the world are screenplays. And it's interesting because I wrote them 10, 15 years ago now, but there is one that I wrote that I really liked, and I called it Die Hard in a Castle. That was my total reference. Die Hard in a Castle with college girls. A college student, a college group goes on a trip to an ancient castle. And while they're there, there's a terrorist lockdown because there's a treasure in the castle. And 2 girls are the only 2 who aren't captured. And they both just found out they're dating the same guy. One is the long-term girlfriend who's come to visit, and one is the exchange student who's, or like the one in the program with him. Oh my god! No, it's really fun.
I'm so
they're
interested.
like sneaking around the castle, trying to get away from these treasure hunters who are rounding them all up to keep them hostage, while also hating each other. I do have a cool scene because one of them's a champion fencer.
Mm.
And there is a moment in the armory where they're being attacked, and she's like, "I got a sword now." But it's modern, it's contemporary, so maybe one day that'll see the big screen. But I had a lot of fun writing that one. Thank you for gasping like that. That just so much.
I really want to see that now. I so badly.
I have noticed that in both of your current series, Red Queen and Realmbreaker, the lead character awakens some power within their blood, which they weren't previously aware of. What draws you to using blood as a conduit for power?
It's interesting because I when you look at it on a more critical level, you're sort of like, shouldn't we all be able to be heroes regardless of what we're born as? And my next book that I'm writing right now is very much a character who has none of that and is just very much, she is what she makes of herself. So I wonder if I was working through something there. But it was definitely one of those kids who grew up reading the Princess Diaries and was always like, maybe someone will be like, you're actually royalty. I think we all go through that. And there is, especially with young adult novels and genre novels and fantasy novels, there is an element of wish fulfillment that we're always writing towards, both for ourselves as the author and for you as the reader. And I don't think there's anyone on earth who hasn't wished to be a little bit more special.
So I want to ask, there's always a love and hate relationship with the queen, but the queen is a strong-willed character. Is she inspired by any historical or famous figure in Hollywood?
Historically, so we're talking about Queen Erida, who is a young queen who is the queen of the most powerful nation, so that she should be the most powerful person in the world, but she's not because she's a woman. And she's still very much tenuous in her position of power. There are men who are pressuring her to get married. We meet her for the first time going through a list of men who are trying to marry her, and all she's thinking is, the second I do this, I lose what power I have and I become queen to somebody's king. And so her whole drive is, how do I protect myself and protect my throne? How do I maintain the power that I am rightfully given? So coming from that angle, I was very much thinking of like Elizabeth I, who never got married because she would be ceding her power away. And I don't think that's unique to a lot of queens. A lot of powerful women in leadership always sort of had it in conjunction to their relationship to men. So I was very much thinking of that in my mind of a woman can wear the crown, but how long does she get to keep it?
I was thinking about this Queen Elizabeth I too.
Yes, definitely. I was one of those Tudor girlies as a teenager. But yeah, again, I wanted you to look at her and hear her side and be like, I get why you're doing this.
So you said that you've always wanted the female-led fantasy novels. Lord of the Rings didn't have any. How does it make you feel being one of the more popular writers in fantasy, which is now more prevalently led by female main characters?
It's really cool, and one thing I talk about is like how we as artists are all links in sort of a chain together in terms of inspiration and what fed us and what made us become who we are as creators and writers and artists. And so I know all the links in the chain behind me, and it's cool to start seeing links in the chain in front of me and things that I know I was a part of that are now going out into the world, because I've been doing this for 10 years now. But yeah, it's very gratifying to see so many more voices be heard and amplified, and more than that, see readers find books that reflect what they've been looking for.
In your own opinion, what makes your book different from the fantasy cliche? As in, what makes it unique and readable?
Part of it, I think, is I try and lean into those tropes and cliches and find the little twist or the little realistic moment where we think, wait, this doesn't actually work. I love playing with familiar fantasy. That's actually like a target I try to hit, and I think Red Queen got there pretty well, and I always hear from a lot of readers, Red Queen was the book that got me into reading fantasy, because I didn't know I liked fantasy. I think people have like this idea, maybe less now because fantasy is becoming so much more accessible, but a lot of people used to think fantasy is very dry. and it's a sort of singular type of story told by a singular type of person. And so there's like a huge barrier to entry. It's going to be boring. It's going to be like long-winded. It's going to be not fast-paced. And so showing people like, no, that's not true. There are tons of fantasy books that are going to scratch exactly that itch that you have. You just kind of got to be tricked into it. So I'm always shooting to have really accessible, familiar fantasy that is easier for a reader to like pick up and dive into. And then halfway through the book, you're like, wait a second. This is a little bit different, and I really like what's happening. I love that sort of, frog in the pot moment.
So this question is a follow-up to Phoebe's first question, and it's Phoebe had already talked about the Red Queen adaptation. Can we expect something for Realmbreaker, and could you give us an idea of a dream cast?
Ooh, Dreamcast, no. I will say I was writing like Chris Hemsworth the whole time. the whole time. That was definitely long-haired Thor in my mind. And Tom Hiddleston was Terraston.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, yeah, I know. But in terms of adaptation, obviously this book is something that we call real hard to make. Any high fantasy is going to be immediately very expensive and require like a gargantuan amount of reader support behind it, and basically proof that there will be an audience that will pay to see this, that will enable us to pay money to make it. I think, because we are, doing what we can do, I would like it to be animation. I think animation, really like adult animation is becoming really, really good, and like War of the Rohirrim came out, and I think that did very well. I know a lot of different studios and streamers are looking into more elevated animation projects. I think we can get a Kraken very easily drawn, not in real life.
Yeah. Bouncing from Phoebe's question, Erida, when you made her a strong-willed female lead, did you think about giving her softer edges, like instead of hard all the way around?
It's interesting because she's a character who, yes, you always want to show as many pieces of that sort of kaleidoscope of who they are to make them feel as well-rounded as possible. She's a character who, unfortunately, we meet in a very hard part of her life. So there aren't really moments where we get to see her softness happen. As the series progresses and when we get more private moments of her with, say, Terraston, we definitely see the moments where she starts to doubt herself. We see the moments where she starts to think, is something happening to me? Whatever's going on with Terraston starts happening to her. You always want to show as much of the character as you can to sort of show to the reader they're real. Because again, you're not going to believe all these extraordinary things if you don't believe that people are going through them.
Yeah. Okay. What is your typical writing routine?
Ooh, well, I'm currently on deadline right now, so my current writing routine is awful. In that I'm writing until 11 o'clock at night, and I feel like my eyes are falling out of my head, and this right now is a break. Because I have a book that was due like a week ago, but I have more time on it. My editor is like, don't kill yourself, you're going to be fine. Whereas I'm like, I want it out of me. Cut it out, because I want to be done. But I'm writing my first adult novel right now, and it is very much Pirates of the Caribbean inspired. It's a pirate romantic fantasy called Tempest, and I'm really excited for it. But I'm now like, I have talked up this book a lot. People think it's going to be really good. I don't know if it will be. But I'm in the first draft, so I'm trying to give myself grace. My typical writing routine when I'm just drafting is I work Monday to Friday. I'm lucky enough that this is my full-time job, and I treat it like my job. I get weekends off, and I find that really helps me stop having any kind of burnout or sort of writer's block, because it helps me maintain my momentum, actually. Sunday scaries kick in on Sunday for people going to work the next day, whereas I'm excited to get back into my work, because I get to work at my house, in my office, just me and my dog, alone for 8 hours. It's wonderful. So yeah, I really feel like I'm so lucky in that, I get stuff done in the morning that I need to get done. I work out, I walk the dog, I have my breakfast and my coffee, and by hopefully 10 a.m., 11, I'm in the chair in my office. I'm can get my sort of the admin stuff out of the way, where I'm answering my emails, if I have any meetings, that sort of thing. I try to do that first, and then I just write for however long I can go that day. And usually 5 or 6 o'clock is when I have my hard hour when my husband gets home from work, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to speak to a person. It's a very nice balance. When I'm not on deadline, I'm working until 11 o'clock at night, playing my pirate music over and over again, and I'm horizontal on the couch like this. It's very bad, but you try.
You said you wanted us to question who we root for when you gave us the antagonist person. Why choose to show us Queen Erida instead of Terrorist?
I feel like Erida is a little bit more interesting than him, and I wanted to play with, again, your expectations for this young queen who's in a terrible position, because you don't look at her and think she's going to be the villain. You think she's going to help out, she's going to be part of this journey together with the team. I loved embedding one villain with all of the heroes, and then I loved getting to track her. As the series progresses, we also then realize why I chose Erida, because she ends up being worse. And making direct choices where you're like, oh girl, you had me up until this moment. And that in the end of the second book, there's something she does where you're like, yeah, you're not coming back.
Oh no. Oh no.
Not in like she dies, in like she's not the good guy ever. Oh no. Let me see what part you're at. I'm not doing this. Oh, it might be this chapter.
Surprise!
No, it's not this one.
So it's probably the next Erida chapter.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
How about you? We keep talking. You start reading.
I don't read that fast.
Writing is a trial and error process that takes time to perfect, if ever. I know that from firsthand. When in your writing journey did you realize that you had made it as an author?
It's a very weird. A month ago, I realized it was the 10-year anniversary of my first book coming out. And I was sort of like, I cannot believe I've been able to do this for 10 years, because most people who publish a book, and there's very few people who publish any book, most people who publish a book only publish. And I'm working on my 9th book right now, and I've somehow been able to make a career out of something that was really hard to make a career out of. I would say sometimes I feel like I have made it, and sometimes I'm like, in another 20 years, I'll feel like I've made it, because this is my job, this is my career, but it unfortunately doesn't have the structure or guarantees that a lot of other jobs have, where I'm like, I don't know if I'll have a book out ever again. Something could happen. And so you're just sort of like taking what you've already been given, while hoping you get to get more, which feels very greedy, but that's where I'm at. So I would say sometimes you feel like you've made it, and sometimes you feel like you can make it just if this one thing changes or you achieve this goal, but the goalposts are always changing in this job, and it's always wanting more and wanting different, and thinking like, that book is now the big one. I want to be that book. Oh no, now it's this and this thing or that. And having had a book series before this one that was massive, and then having a new series that I love and I really am so proud of, and having it not reach as many readers yet. It's a humbling experience. It's a very privileged experience to still have, but at the same time, it does make you feel like nothing is constant and nothing is guaranteed, and you just have to continuously keep running just to stay in the race. Because it is a race. It doesn't feel like there's an actual finish line.
As an author myself, I was wondering, when writing, do you ever recycle plots or characters from scrapped ideas? And if so, how do you make sure that they fit into the new world that you've put them into?
I've recycled characters in this book from a fan fiction that I wrote that's no longer on the internet. What? Pieces of a character. Pieces of a character. I'm surprised nobody's figured it out yet, because it was very popular.
The fan fiction or what you wrote it about?
The fan fiction.
I've recycled.
I was an OG. I was a fanfiction.net girl. You guys don't even know. I was at the school. Okay. I was at the school library, not the school library, I was at the town library. So my parents worked and the bus cost money to go home, and they were like, you can wait at the library until someone can pick you up. And I would go to the town library and I'd log onto the computers in the corner and I would write fanfiction. And they were like, wow, she loves the library. Yes, I do.
I've used so many characters from other media.
That's
just
okay.
made my own.
Yes, that's very much what it's part of. We're all building on top of other things.
So I want to ask, do you have hard time writing the world building, fighting scenes, or any other obstacles you face while writing Romebreaker or other books?
So the challenge for me with world building is not doing it, it's stopping myself from doing it. I love world building. I don't know what it is about me, but it's one of like my fixations. And I can do family trees all day long. I can figure out trade routes all day long. I can draw maps all day long. But then there's the balance of you don't want to burn out your enthusiasm for a story before you even get to writing it. So with Realmbreaker, I did do more world building than I did with Red Queen because it was a much more immersive world with more of a journey in it with characters from all these different places that I needed to know and know sort of their background and their languages and their belief systems and their culture and their politics. But there does come a point where you're like, enough. Some things you need to be discovered in the text. And there's so many things that I know about this world that were never on the page, but I still know them.
Thank you.
Action scenes I love. Action scenes I can do in my sleep. There's romantic, quiet moments that I find very difficult.
Another previous interview, don't know how long it's been. But you've mentioned you like traveling. Have you ever had influences from where you've traveled, what you've seen, and have you ever found yourself writing it into a book?
So my mom is from Scotland, and so I've been going to Scotland since I was a little girl. And in Realmbreaker specifically, Dom's Enclave and Iona, that area is very, very much Scotland, Edinburgh inspired. I described the city exactly like Edinburgh in my mind with the ridge and the castle and the wall and everything and the climate. And I kind of make fun of it in the third book of how rainy it is and gray. But I actually, for my new book, the pirate one, I took a research trip to the Bahamas last June. And I got to go to some of the forts and a pirate museum. And also, while it's really, really valuable to go to those specific places and see the exhibits and learn about what was going on there, it's also valuable to just stand there on the beach and feel like what that humidity feels like and what the air smells like and how warm the water is and the sensation of the sand, how soft it is, just like these little things that are going to make your story feel more authentic and use those senses to really bring the reader into it, besides being able to say, this part of the ship was called this.
Yeah.
In your opinion, do you like having your own books as paperback or hardcover?
Ooh, I love a hardcover. Paperback is great for travel. Kindle is best for travel. And sometimes there are some books that are are so much better as a Kindle book, but they're not books with maps. Books with maps cannot be Kindle books. So I feel like Realmbreaker, especially the ebook, anytime someone's like, I'm going to download an ebook, I'm kind of like, you need the map, and it's really hard to read an ebook with a map. But I think if I had to choose, I would say hardcover. I do say I break the spines of my books, and I dog-ear the pages. I'm not precious about them. I read them in the bath. There's waterlogged books in there. Oh, no. Kindle's good for the bath, unless you drop it, and then you gotta go after it.
Okay, so I like creating my own original characters. Will I ever create a book? No, I will not. I don't think I could survive that. But this question is, did you ever have an idea in your head and once you got to the end, you were about to finish final draft of a book, you realized it just wouldn't work?
Thank God, no. There is a moment that I'm in right now. I call all the different stages of writing just the panics.
Yeah.
And I'm in the panic part right now where I'm finishing up a book and thinking, a book I wrote in third person, and I'm thinking, should this have been written in first person? And I had, thank you. And I had that same panic at the end of Red Queen, where it was written in first person. I thought, should I have written this in third? And I almost started rewriting it in third. Thank God I did not. But this one, I'm sort of like, at the very least, I have the backstop of, I'm giving it to my editor. I'm gonna flag to her, like, just so you know, if you think this might be better in first person, you can tell me that. But I know it's like a common worry that I have, so I'm not terribly concerned. But no, I've never gotten to the end of a draft and thought, this is flawed at conception. Thank God. Because that would suck.
Okay, when creating the cover of Groundbreaker, was there an idea? What was the idea you gave to your illustrator?
Ooh, good question. So the original cover for Realmbreaker, we went back and forth on it for a very long time, and it just, every tweak, every change, we were like, it's not quite right. It was a person's face, and like the head was making different things from the book, and it just wasn't working. And eventually got to the point where I was like, every iteration we're doing, every tweak we're changing now is making it worse. This is not happening. We have to change gears entirely. And I mocked up what I wanted the cover to be in Photoshop very badly. And it was, did any of you guys watch the Star Show, The White Queen? So the promo images, it's about one of the queens of England. And one of the promo images, she's holding a sword under her head this way, and there's blood coming off her hand. And I was like, that's it. So I just literally cut that image from one of the posters and just put it like this in my Photoshop and wrote Victoria Aveyard Groundbreaker and sent it to them, and I said, this. And they went, okay. And then and I love when my books are cohesive and the covers sort of make sense and match each other. And so obviously, as the series goes on, the cover changes a little bit in what Corinne is wearing, in the way she's holding the sword. It starts with her grasping the blade because she doesn't know what she's doing. Suddenly she's, wielding it, and then the third book, there's a reason someone is trying to take her sword.
Good luck with that, Jay.
Sure. What is the best advice you've been given?
Ooh. So I can't remember who said this, and I have a bunch of advice. But they said the first draft is you telling the story to yourself, and the second draft is you telling the story to an audience. And I find that very, very helpful because I think a lot of the time when you're writing for yourself, but you're not thinking of how it's going to land with the reader. And one of the really valuable parts of my writing process is when my first draft goes away to my editor and I don't touch it for like a month or a month and a half. And I don't let myself reread it while my editor has it. I don't let myself think about it, so that when it comes back to me and it's time to read it again, I've kind of forgotten the story and I can read it as if I am experiencing it like you guys would. And that allows me to see those moments where I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense. Oh, actually, that was better than I remember it being. Oh, this is confusing. Oh, I didn't plant this. Oh, this needs more of this. I can sense those moments where it bumps much better than when I'm too deep in it and I have all this context that you don't have. And then in terms of writing fantasy, I had a professor who said you can get an audience to believe one unbelievable thing, and everything else has to make sense under that unbelievable thing. And I think I try to do that in my books as much as possible. But I think what that really has to do with is you as the reader have a very tenuous amount or suspension of disbelief. And once we lose that suspension of disbelief, once you've read a book where it made you do, too many times, you're thrown out of it, and it's really, really hard to get you back into it once that disbelief has been broken. So you can have that one crazy thing like magic exists, but then it's like also aliens, and you're just like, wait, one of those things can't be with the other, and you just don't want the reader to be saying, wait, what? So many times you want the process to be as smooth as possible, you want the reading to be as smooth as possible.
A lot of the female characters in this book think and say a lot of derogatory things towards men. Why give them prejudice? What does it serve exactly?
I think it serves a lot of the rage that we as women have. And I think male characters have said derogatory things about women for a very long time. That's what we think.
As a writer, you are also a reader, a consumer of stories in other worlds. Is there a story or maybe a particular book that you wish you had written other than Lord of the Rings?
Well, there's many different reasons to want to have written a book. I would love to have written a book where it's like, okay, I don't have to worry about any of my other books ever selling again because I'm safe no matter what, because that book sold so many books. These are, both of these series are colleagues of mine, to the point where I'm like intimidated to speak to them, but then I'll be on a panel with them and I'm like, I love you. So the Queen's Thief series by Megan Whalen Turner is an incredible fantasy, so well written, the best unreliable narrator I've ever read. Such a good series. And then like also came out of nowhere with a really good slow burn Enemies to Lovers, where I was like, I didn't know I was getting that, and I'm very happy. So Megan Whalen Turner, the Queen's Thief series. I think this is probably my favorite book series of the last 10 years that I've written. If I could re-experience reading this book again, I would. The Winter Night series by Catherine Arden. The first book is called The Bear and the Nightingale, and it is an incredible fantasy novel about a young woman in Russia during sort of the turn from paganism to Christian Orthodoxy, and she's a witch.
Did I ask one more time what it's called?
The Bear and the Nightingale. And she's a witch, and she's dealing with like the church sort of slowly moving in and encroaching upon all of these pagan beliefs and start trying to kill them, while she also knows that they still exist, and she's allied with like a winter demon. They have to help each other because the church is actually being driven by another demon who's using that to root out anyone who's way. It's very good, and it's written in like this time of Russian history that's really interesting, and like the Golden Horde, the Mongols are invading at the same time, and so there are moments of real history in it where you're like, oh, that could have been happening in the background. You're right, there was a cosmic battle between demons also happening. I really enjoyed it.
Do you ever get overwhelmed by the popularity of your works?
Wow, that's a crazy question. I don't want to assume that my books are popular. At my base level, it's always to assume no one has read them, whether it be like readers or colleagues or people at events or anything like that. I almost don't think about it, because I think if I did think about it, I'd get very overwhelmed, and I would regress to my 14-year-old self being like, what do you mean I get to be an author? What do you mean that's what my life is in 20 years? What do you mean that's crazy? Because I was definitely that kid with her big thick glasses in the closet of my room, like scribbling my little stories and reading my little books and wishing I could fall through a door into another world. Yeah.
I want to ask, like, I'm writing a book, but I have a like stress of what other people think, because I'm writing it in such a way that I can like understand it. Like, I read it without draft or without fixing it, without like everything, and I have stress of what other people think. How did you overcome it?
Actually, because I was definitely one, those stories I was writing in the closet I was writing so no one could see them. And, you know, my mom would be like, what are you doing? And I'm like, get away from me. And even now, when I'm drafting and someone's reading over my shoulder, I freak out. I have like a little privacy screen so that people on planes don't think I'm crazy. But the thing that helped me, besides, was writing fan fiction. And it didn't just help me because it helped me figure out what kind of stories I like to tell and what I'm good at and what I'm bad at. It also was a really good way for me to get comfortable with other people reading my work without my name and face being attached to it. So it was almost like a good way to ease into it, because it's very low stakes, it's very low stress. And I suddenly discovered, like, I loved posting a chapter and waking up the next day and hopefully having a couple of reviews and reading what people thought. Sometimes they were very mean, and sometimes they were very nice. And sometimes I was like, yeah, you got what I was doing. I'm so happy. So that helped. So it really just comes down to finding ways to let others read your work in ways that feel comfortable to you, and then sort of expanding what that is. And then when I went to college, I studied screenwriting. Most of my classes, most of my programming was workshop style, where we brought in our writing every week and everybody in the class read them, I know. And then you came in the next week and you sat down with your notes that you had taken on everybody else's work, and they had their notes on your work, and to each other's faces, you guys would critique each other. And that gave you a thick skin very, very fast. So I would say fan fiction is a good way to start. Workshop writing is also necessary, unfortunately. You have to have a thick skin to do this professionally.
Thank you.
You have a lot of characters. Did you have anyone that you particularly liked to write, or just a favorite character overall from like an outsider's perspective?
Oh my god, in Realm Breaker, you try to love all your children equally, but all parents really do have a favorite. I loved writing Sarasa. I really loved writing her. And if you guys get to the end of the trilogy, there's more with her to be done. More with her and one other character, but I don't want to spoil things.
She's my favorite. She's my favorite.
I know, she's so fun because I love writing that very strong, sure female character who also, I'm an adult now, I was 22 when I was writing my Red Queen, and Sarasa is now closer to who I am than Mare was in Red Queen for me. So I felt more reflected in her, and I felt like I was getting to make a commentary through her of things that I necessarily wanted to talk about in the story.
Nice.
And I love that she's capable. I love characters who are super capable and flawed. I love flawed characters. They're just the best. Writing characters who are good, who are heroes, who are always going to make the right choice, are so difficult because they're so boring.
We got time for maybe one more question.
What is your hair routine?
My hair routine. Oh my god, that's so sweet of you to ask. Before events, I sleep with it in a bonnet, so it's actually like smooth and nice. And I'm very, very grateful to everyone who told me to sleep with it in a bonnet because it's not really something white people do, and it is a game changer. And I just curled my hair this morning, but I use Kerastase Thermatique. It's like a leave-in conditioner almost after I wash my hair, but I only wash my hair like once a week if I can, and I Dyson it. Thank you. That's very kind of me to say.
Just your hair is so silky.
Thank you. It's the
Thank you.
Before we go, I'd like to give you something.
Oh.
Yes!
It's Ronan.
Oh my god! You guys, no one gives me Ronan fan art. I love
Ronan.
I really like this book and this freak. Me too. I do too. He does something really freaky in the third book.
Oh, yeah.
Oh man, thank you guys. And this was lovely. You guys had wonderful questions. What are you thinking?
Behalf of Vampire Club.
Oh my god, thank
Thank
you.
you.
You guys, this is great.